for fun, are there conspiracies? Yeah, I think it gives me solace. I don't know about you, Matt, but it gives me some comfort to think that we're probably not in as much of a crisis. I mean, the sky isn't falling. I mean, I always like to think. I love reading history books to learn about some of these debates, or even just learning about the history of Hamilton through the musical. Obviously, in the last popularity of that, we had I believe, a sitting vice president shoot and kill Aaron Burr, right? Killing Hamilton when we on our worst day in the last 4 years. Hasn't it been worse before with conspiracies or with some of these rivalries that we see in politics?
Well, yes, I do think it has been worse. And it also gives me some solace. So it's not as if we've never been as polarized as we are now, or have people been as nasty to each other politically in the political sphere as they are now. I guess the question is, are we in the 1850s or are we in the 1870s? Right? Both periods, highly polarized, tremendous party conflict. Things could get very nasty, and people have very strong views about their parties. And the newspaper, people talk about biased media, and this is the conservative. That's what newspapers were. I mean, the New York Times I think it was the Democratic Party. That was it. You read it. You read it. I've read these old papers, and it just reads like this partisan, pamphlet. Like, it had news, but it was always tilted to one party. But if we're in the 1850s, we're in much worse shape than the 1870s. Right. 1850s is, we are fundamentally, our differences are non-reconcilable, and the only solution is a dissolution of the country. 1870s, we ended up not obviously going down that route. I tend to think that we are more in the latter. We're more in the 1870s, 1880s. Yes, there's occasionally talk about political violence. There's been some, occasional people saying, oh, maybe, the military should seize our ballot boxes because the election was fraudulent, and there's all this conspiracy theories that are going about, as you mentioned. That tends still to be the fringe. I know there are people in office, in Congress, who talk this way, but there aren't that many. They are the fringe. The social media, as I mentioned earlier, like social media serves to amplify it to some degree. But the vast majority of Americans do not share those views, certainly not to the extreme as the ones you hear in the news and Twitter and Facebook, et cetera. Yes, there's occasionally talk. I know that, the head of the Republican Party in Texas, who was for himself a former House member, who was a really colorful fellow, said, well, maybe Texas needs to leave the Union. Okay, yeah, fine, whatever, right? Let's just talk. They're not actually going to do that.
It comes up every now and then.
Yes, right. California, parts of California say it, parts of Texas say it, parts of New York say it. Yeah, we're not there. We're not Spain, okay? We're not the United Kingdom. Right. We don't have a genuine, real threat of secession or rebellion in our country. And yes, there are conspiracy theories floating about. It is not new in American politics. Another example that comes to mind would be the Know Nothing Party of the 1850s. And it was a political party that was organized around, I wouldn't call it white supremacy, but anti-Catholicism, anti-immigrant views. They were also had conspiracy theories that the Catholics were secretly, running the country. And there were street battles in Baltimore between their partisans and others, people shooting at each other at the polling place. They got members elected to Congress. Nathaniel Banks, who was a Speaker of the House, was a member of the Know Nothing Party. So they reached quite serious, it was short-lived, but some significant prominence in the 1850s. We don't have that. The Republican Party is not at that level at all. The Democratic Party is not. They've got members who are that way, but they are not that way. So yes, if it provides solace, it's not. There are things in American politics now that are not pretty, but these things have happened before, and they've been worse in our history.